Gumbadani Gyanadu, which is good evening. It's good to see you here in Burragum, which is the traditional language of the community that I grew up on the Darling Downs. I'm Vicky McDonald, and it's my great privilege to be the State Librarian and CEO here at the State Library of Queensland. And on behalf of my colleagues, I welcome you to a fascinating Game Changers conversation with Gilmour Space Technologies. But I'd like to begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples and their continuing connection to land and as custodians of stories for millennia. Here at the State Library of Queensland, we are inspired by this tradition in our work to share and preserve Queensland's memory for future generations. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our speakers this evening, Kody Cook and Ashley Hasforth of Gilmour Space Technologies. Also our facilitator, Kate O'Toole from ABC Radio, Professor Cameron Newton from QUT, members of the Library Board of Queensland, the Queensland Library Foundation Council, the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame Management Committee, and also the Induction Committee. Also representatives from our founding partner QUT and other generous partners and sponsors including Pitcher Partners, Channel 7, Morgans, Ray White and Springfield City Group. And also a very warm welcome to friends and supporters of State Library for joining us at the library here this evening as well as online. Queensland's journey into space history began almost 60 years ago on the banks of a dam near Toowoomba. Kody Creek was one of 6 NASA tracking stations built in Australia in the 1960s. The engineers and technicians at Kody Creek played a part in putting man on the moon, and their experiments were instrumental in the design of the Apollo 11 communications systems. Kody Creek's short but remarkable life is preserved as a digital story in State Library's collection for you to enjoy any time. In 2025, an exciting new chapter in space history is unfolding here in Queensland with the launch of Australia's first homegrown rocket into orbit. It is our absolute pleasure to have Kody and Ashley here tonight to present this evening's Game Changer, Gilmour Space Technologies, as part of this year's World Science Festival. Kody Cook is the Deputy Chief Engineer at Gilmour Space Technologies. As a multidisciplinary engineer, Kody has over a decade of experience in developing, operating and managing space and aerospace programs. Ashley Hasforth is the Chief Financial Officer at Gilmour Space Technologies, so he looks after the money that Kody spends, I guess. And Ashley works with some of the country's biggest investors to fund the launch of Gilmour Space's Eris orbital launch vehicle and small satellite platforms. It's an extraordinary story, a Queensland story born on the Gold Coast. So strap yourself in to hear about the business and the science behind their success. Kate O'Toole will be expertly facilitating this evening's conversation. And Kate, as I know you would know, is an ABC Radio Brisbane presenter. Previously, as a reporter for ABC's Triple J Hack program, she interviewed politicians like Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott, presented a special broadcast from Canberra for the apology of the stolen generations, and covered 2 federal elections. The conversation is also being broadcast on State Library's website, so a warm welcome to everybody who's joining us virtually this evening as well. Game Changers is a Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame initiative made possible through our partnership with QUT. I'd also like to thank the World Science Festival Brisbane and the Queensland Museum for including tonight's event in their calendar. I hope this experience will inspire you to explore more of their fabulous program of events as well. If you are sharing your thoughts about tonight's conversation on social media, please use the hashtag QBLHOF. And we'll also be using Slido to collect questions from online viewers as well as those in the audience this evening. So if you go to slido.com and enter the event code QBLHOF or scan the QR code that's on the screen, you'll be able to enter your questions. And it's quite a democratic platform. You can vote for questions and they'll go up to the top as well. And Kate will do her best to get to as many questions as possible during the evening. I'd also like you to experience the moving story of the Sam family in our latest exhibition, The Unspoken Spirit of the Kalkadoons. It's here on level 2 in our exhibition gallery, and our gallery will be open this evening for you to visit that exhibition. But for now, I hope you will enjoy tonight's conversation. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Kate. As Vicky said, thanks so much, Vicky, by the way, for that introduction. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet here tonight as well, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to any First Nations people here in the room with us today. Game Changers, it's all about bold business and being part of the World Science Festival Brisbane, bold science as well. I'm so excited about the conversation that we are about to have. Just while we do, is there any chance we can go back to the slide and make sure that everybody's had a chance to have a look at that QR code, to scan it, and to make sure you enter your questions and get all sorted for that? I can see a few phones being held up. I know we typically think it's a rude thing to do, but it's really not in this instance, so get amongst it. You might have a great question, and I'm looking forward to all the questions here from the floor. Also, if you're watching on the live stream, welcome too. Just another little housekeeping thing. If you need to leave, and I'm sure you'll be glued to your seat, but if you do need to leave, there's doors at the back that you can go through if you just make your way to the side, and then up the stairs you'll find the doors at the back, and if we need to leave an emergency, of course, there's doors at the front as well. You may have noticed we'll have two Auslan reporters who will be helping us out today. We have Julie and we have Candice. And if you could just give them a little quick welcome, a little quick round of applause to help them here, welcome them here today as well. Excellent. Okay, so Gilmour Space Technologies, a Queensland business, as Vicky said, from its base in the Gold Coast to its spaceport in Bowen. I mean, imagine thinking about Bowen and thinking about a spaceport 10 years ago. It's wild, isn't it, to think about that. A business that is poised to launch literally into its next phase, a business that can help us understand the future, I think, a bit tonight, which is exciting too. We casually use satellites all the time. You've probably used your sat-nav for years. Maybe you're somebody who uses a whole lot of satellites, a constellation of satellites to do business from home, to ditch your commute, or to start a business perhaps, where you might not have been able to do so otherwise. We use them all the time. We'll hear more about that and more about what the future holds for us as well a little bit later through tonight. So, yeah, you just think about it now. If this is what the technology gives us today, in 5 or 10 years, what is going to be possible? Let's find out, shall we? Let's welcome to the stage Ashley Hasforth and Kody Cook. Thank you. So you can already start, if you'd like to, put your questions in. Don't be shy about that. So, Ashley and Kody, I thought if you could just give us a little snapshot to start. What exactly is Gilmour Space Technologies? What is it poised to do at the moment?
I'll give you a quick background of the company. So Gilmour Space is an end-to-end space provider. So what that basically means is we design, build and launch rockets, satellites from our own space site up at Bowen. So we're only one of 3 companies in the world that can do that. So we're in a privileged spot.
And the kind of the key difference is that you said is the end-to-end part of it, that whole, the paddock to plate of rockets and satellites, if you will.
Correct, exactly. So one of the big, I guess, advantages that we have, if you can launch rockets, you basically can control what can go into space. So we have a lot of control of what we can send up there.
And what are you poised to do right now? Tell me about this Eris launch and how significant it is for Gilmour Space Technologies.
In Australia, we have had a shot at launching rockets before, but they've been suborbital or they've been someone else's. This will be the first time in Australia's history that we have an Australian-developed, manufactured, assembled, tested rocket that has the ability to go into orbit and launching from Australian soil. So this will be quite momentous. I think we're one of only a few developed countries left who hasn't yet done this.
Okay, so we're behind in this.
Relative to the big players. Relative to the big players.
Right. And how much of a leap has it been to be able to achieve all of those things, to be able to design and develop and build, and then to be at this point and being ready to launch? What are some of the key challenges that you've met to be here?
I would say one of the biggest ones is just our experience as a nation. We're in a very opportune spot here in the Southern Hemisphere, and we've got incredible education, but we haven't built many big aerospace platforms here from the ground up. A lot of the time we buy stuff from overseas and we retrofit it for Australian purposes, but this is the first time we've really built something this large with this much capability, all homegrown. So,
And what's the advantage in that?
one part is the ability to service specifically Australian needs. So a great example is there's a Himawara is a Japanese satellite which is used for natural disaster response. We get the scraps in terms of time with that satellite system, and by having the capability to provide end-to-end services of launching satellites on an Australian rocket from an Australian launch site gives us the ability to actually start building stuff for our need and not being so reliant on other countries.
Okay, so let's just consider the launch that's coming up soon, in next month maybe?
Yes.
Next few weeks maybe?
Yes. So it was actually meant to be this week. I'm actually thankful for the first time ever that there was a little bit of a delay so I could be here tonight.
I would so wanted to be talking to you about what happened yesterday, but anyway,
no.
never mind.
I think everyone would.
Yes, no. We've, as you can see in the photos behind me here, we've had the rocket vertical since about April last year, and we've been going through the motions of testing. We've done dry dress rehearsals, wet dress rehearsals, all the time learning more about Bowen and what it's like from a weather point of view, and the vehicle itself. We've been learning more and more about it the more that we test and operate it. And working with our regulators as well, we're really trying to make sure that when we light the candle that everything goes well. Not saying that it'll be a success, but we just want to have an opportunity to safely launch the rocket and collect as much data as we can.
Well, what is success is part of it, isn't it? What would a successful launch look like?
It's a very good question. It depends on who you ask. We've had a lot of conversations lately with investors and potential investors who probably don't understand the space industry as, say, someone like when you're in it. So to tell people that 10 seconds or getting off the pad is a success is hard to believe. But from that time, we can get so much data that will put us in such a good place for future launches that you can't put a dollar value on that. So
that would be 10 seconds off the pad, and then what? It would, like, if it was to blow up or if it would fall down, or what? Like what? Yeah. Just what happens after that 10 seconds?
Yeah, blows up maybe.
I do want to say that it's going to be very unexciting. Yeah. It's like out of all of the different types of rocket propulsion and that's out there. If you've got a solid rocket engine, I'll put it this way: a solid rocket engine is a candle that can't be put out. As soon as you light that one, it just keeps going, or you've got to blow it up with TNT or something. A liquid rocket engine, you've got liquid oxidizer, liquid fuel, and heat, the fire pyramid thing. Those ones, when you mix the fuel together and it ignites, it explodes quite violently. What we do at Gilmour is we have a solid fuel with a liquid oxidizer, and the way that we stop the rocket from doing anything spectacular is just by cutting off that liquid oxidizer feed. So when those two mix and they haven't been catalyzed and gone through a special process, they're quite boring.
Yeah.
So likely the rocket would just tip over a little bit, fall on the pad, and just smolder.
Okay.
It'll pop. It'll do a little pop. But it'll be probably the least exciting rocket explosion you've seen in your life.
Okay.
Just to temper expectation.
And is this a moment where Ashley cries because of the amount of money that is smouldering on the launch pad, or are you excited about it?
We'll be picking up the pieces.
Yeah, we'll try and reuse as much as we can.
That's a genuine aim, is it? Like, I don't know. Is it possible to do that?
No.
No. There's no recycling bin for...
unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and put some in the hardware lab. Yeah, this is a durability test, so...
I think the worst possible scenario, if something does happen on the pad and the actual pad blows up or for whatever reason breaks, that will put us back quite a lot. So as long as that doesn't happen, and we get off the pad, then everyone will be very, very happy.
In the meantime, you have those conversations with investors and make sure that they're across the idea of 10 seconds being awesome.
It really is an education piece.
Yeah.
For people outside the space industry or don't have a lot of background in it, it is very much bringing them along for the ride, and really telling them what success looks like. And we're just letting them know that no privately funded first orbital launch has ever been successful. So it just doesn't happen. So I think when people realise that, then
as
they
in launching up into orbit and being able to just sort of carry on,
Exactly.
So, and what would be the bits, if you could explain the rocket for me, and if you explain Eris a little bit about what would happen if this was the one that would successfully launch into orbit as opposed to the 10-second success that we're very excited about. What would that look like, or how does this rocket work as it goes up into? Sorry, is that okay?
It's such an exciting question. I love this. Okay, so I've got the model up on that side over there. So you'll see it tapers off about halfway up the rocket. See how it sort of comes in semi-conically kind of thing. Everything below that point is stage one. So 120 seconds into flight, just above that little conical section, half of the rocket gets dropped off. That'll come back down, and then the top part, the skinny bit, will keep going for another 120 seconds. And there, we've got 4 hybrid rocket engines in the bottom. We've got 1 hybrid rocket engine in that second stage. Then, after that, 240 seconds into flight, the payload fairing will split open, and the third stage will be ejected out of that. On top of the third stage, we've got our payload, which is our Vegemite, which we're excited to try and put into orbit. And all things going well, that third stage should go all the way into, I think it's a 180 kilometre to 220 kilometre eccentric orbit. So it'll be up there. That's not very high in orbital terms. We'll get a lap or two around the Earth, and then that'll burn up.
Right, okay. And nothing will fall. The earlier sections of the rocket will fall down, but that Vegemite is never coming back.
That Vegemite's not coming, unless we fail early, in which case I'll grab the toast and then go try and reclaim what we've lost.
A great question, and thank you so much to Damon for this question. And please feel free to vote on questions as 5 people have here, or to write your own. But why Bowen? Why launch rockets in Bowen? And then the secondary questions, why not even further north? But talk to that if you could.
Excellent. Really, really good question. It starts from an efficiency of the rocket point of view and where you want to be going in the solar system. So if a lot of our orbits that we're interested in are equatorial, so if we think of the Earth, it goes this way. We can change that inclination and we can get to a mid-inclination orbit. That's still really good to launch from around the equator. The reason for that is if you think about spinning a basketball and looking at a single point on that basketball, if you're near that center line, you're traveling pretty quickly, and that actually gives you a kick if you're going into a prograde orbit. If you're up near the top of the basketball, you're not spinning very fast, so you don't get any benefit from being up there. So you want to be as close as you can to the equator. That's for mid-inclination or equatorial orbits, or if you want to go into an ecliptic orbit, which means you're going out somewhere else in the solar system. So 3 out of 4 orbits is pretty good. The other orbit is a sun-synchronous orbit or a polar orbit, which is up and down. You want to be away from the equator if that's the direction that you want to send your satellite into. So good criteria is to try and get as close to the equator as possible. Being directly on that 0 latitude line is awesome. It's perfect, but it's got a cosine relationship, so you have a lot of benefit from being within that sort of plus minus 20 degrees. There's an additional benefit. The Earth is on a 23.5 degree lean. So if you do want to go to the moon or you do want to go to Mars, you've got to be somewhere in between plus minus 23.5 degrees. Otherwise, you've got to do a dog leg to try and get out to those other planets. And that's pretty inefficient. So there's a lot of math involved, but it turns out that being close to the equator is good. but you don't have to be right on it.
Yeah, and that sort of secondary question is why not even further north? Is it there's
not that
no
much
relative
extra
benefit?
bang for buck. The closer you get, the more cyclones and stuff apparently happen. You want to try and stay away from the windy bits.
Yeah.
And then the other advantage, if you are doing those prograde orbits, you're launching in the direction that the Earth's spinning. You also want to be somewhere on the east coast, so you want to be launching out over sea ideally. You don't want to be launching over capital cities or anything like that. China does do that a little bit, and it can get a little bit spicy sometimes if you're dropping rockets on people. They tend not to like it.
Okay, so we've had, just imagine, an amazing, much more than 10-second Eris launch. Everything's gone great. The company's kicking on, and Gilmour Space Technologies is just evolving and growing beautifully. How do you what sort of vision do you have for the company in 5 or 10 years? Like what, on a great trajectory, what's happening?
So I think immediately that the plans are we've got a few test flights. So this is the first one. We've got a couple more test flights. By the time we get to around about our 1.4 model, we want that to be a launch rocket that we can build and launch one every month. So that's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. So we'll be launching one a month. From there, we'll try and design bigger rockets to take up larger payloads and more mass to orbit.
Sorry, just to interrupt. So the payload is now no longer Vegemite. It is
it'll be satellites, commertal clients.
And how many in one go?
In the 1.4 model, we're looking at about 400 kilos of payloads. So that'll be probably 2-3 satellites that we're trying to take up. So from there, we'll be going to a bigger class rocket. That'll be 3,000 kilograms, I think that is on the model.
The design of the rocket changes slightly as the market does, and different people come out with different types of satellites. But yeah, we'll be looking at the medium lift sort of size, so multiple ton of payload.
So that's the short term. Longer term, it's very much about space travel, space tourism, getting to the moon, putting a space station on the moon, colonising the universe. So
Gilmour Space Technologies is doing all of that.
Basically conquering the world.
Right.
So our founder and CEO, Adam, has some very high expectations of where he wants to see the company. He's actually said he has to live for another 100 years to see what he wants to achieve. There's a bright future of what we want to achieve between the next 5 and 10 years.
Neil's asked a relevant question. How many times could you afford to fail before you have a successful launch?
Our first 3 tests, or 3 first launches are tests. So effectively, we want to reach orbit in one of those. We could go further, but we really do want to reach orbit in one of those first 3. And from there, then we can start doing commercial flights.
And amazing to think the first one could just be 10 seconds and you'd be happy about that. And that then the subsequent 2 after that, you're hoping for a full orbit success.
Yeah, one of those 2 we definitely need to reach orbit, yes. So there's a massive backlog in the moment in people being able to take satellites up to orbit. So if we can get there, we will be able to contract commercial clients very quickly. So we're actually telling a lot of people, because our competitors are pretty much booked out for the next 2 or 3 years. So we are telling competitors that before we even reach orbit, you want to get a contract with us, because once we reach orbit, it'll be too late because we'll already be booked out for the first 10, 20 launches. So it's very competitive. It's kind of like going to a school dance with 2 guys and 100 girls. You're going to get a dance with someone. So we just need to reach orbit.
Yes.
One of the things worth spelling out as well, if you get, say, with 540 seconds flight time, if you get 10 seconds into flight, you'd run the numbers and go, okay, you've made that, 0.5% of the way into the mission, 0.2%. That's not really how it works when you consider everything that happens before T0, to have done all of that math, gone over all of the regulatory hurdles, to have done all of the design, all of the testing, all the analysis. You actually, by the time the clock hits 0, you are 99.9% of the way to having that capability ready to orbit. So we have learnt a phenomenal amount for a company of 230 odd people. Yep. We've got, I can count on one hand how many have actually launched rockets before. It's been a learning exercise for quite a lot of people, but we're feeling incredibly equipped to jump into the next vehicles and see success if we don't on the first one.
Let's hear from this question from Dan, and you did touch on that idea of the commercial applications and being able to sign people up straight away, but Dan was curious about how Gilmour Space Technologies intends to monetise rockets to generate profit and returns for investors.
Yeah, certainly. So our business model, as I said, is end-to-end. So we have rockets, and we're going to be launching rockets. On those rockets, we'll be taking satellites up to orbit. So that's one revenue stream. A lot of that revenue will potentially come from governments, defence forces, or communication companies, or Earth observation companies, depending on what the satellite is for. So that's one revenue stream. We've also got revenue streams from actually building satellites as well. So we've got our first satellite, I hate to say it, but going up on a SpaceX flight earlier or later this year. So that's another revenue stream. So we have got a lot of potential there at the moment. We also have what we are calling the hypersonic test vehicle as well. So that's getting effectively one of the stages of our rocket to hyper speeds and testing payloads and how payloads react to that speed on the front of the rocket.
Where and how do you do that? Is that a Bowen thing?
It is.
Yeah. Explain a little, if you could.
So the second stage, the tapered section of the rocket, that second stage vehicle, it has enough delta V, enough horsepower to get a payload up into Mach 5 and beyond, which is on the order of 5,000-ish kilometres now, a bit faster than that. At that point in time, you can launch a scramjet, and a scramjet is okay, maybe I won't try and explain that one just now, but you've got a jet engine, which will get you up to roughly Mach 1, Mach 2, so 1,000, 2,000 kilometres an hour.
Yep.
Can't go much faster than that. The engines start to tear themselves apart. So then you need a scramjet to get you up to the next phase of flight, which will get you from 1,000 to 3,000 roughly kilometres an hour. And then you get into the hypersonics, which is the scramjet space, which is a special type of air-breathing engine. UQ here has done a phenomenal amount of research into scramjets, but this is how we start getting aircraft that fly at 12 times the speed of sound. These things go incredibly quickly. And it's very interesting from a commercial point of view. People want to be able to fly from one side of the world to the other side of the world in a couple of hours. And it's also really interesting from a defence point of view as well, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I'm feeling slightly nauseous, though, about travelling that fast. Surely that's not good, right?
It doesn't feel as quick. It's the acceleration you feel. Okay. So if you have a slow ramp up, you're good to go. It's like they say, it's not the fall that kills you, it's the slowing down at the other end.
Excellent. Okay, so that's a couple of cool applications for this technology that you're working on already. And you mentioned a few things that, obviously populating Mars, etc., that will be a little bit further down the track.
Yeah.
Do you feel that we don't kind of think terribly much about everything that we're doing that already interacts with satellites right now? And I'm wondering, us, terrestrial beings, how much we will notice the technological developments over the next 10 years? What is it going to be doing for us?
Oh, everything's just going to get faster. So everything's going to get faster, clearer. We're going to get a lot more data around what's happening all across the world. I mean, it's a very big part of the defence industry, is knowing from satellites what's happening with China, other countries around the world. The communication from those satellites is going to get faster and better and clearer. So the Defence Force are going to realise it immediately. People are going to envisage it and see it in their daily lives as like it's come from over the last 20 years or so. I remember when I first lived overseas, I used to have to write a letter to my folks every Sunday night. That's how old I am. And then it got to Skype, and now you can just WhatsApp someone immediately. So all those things have happened because of what's occurred in space via satellites and so forth. So, some of the things we kind of envisage what are going to happen in 100 years from now, similar to airplanes. If you remember, it was a real novelty to sit on an airplane for the very first time, look out the window and you saw the heaven beneath you with the clouds and so forth. That's probably going to happen with space travel in the future. People will be just looking out the window of a rocket and thinking, oh, this is just normal. It's just a matter of time.
So hard to wrap your head around,
It is.
that I have to say. Those are some of the kind of positive possibilities. A question from Simon wondering about the less positive. What do you worry about in terms of disruptive tech in the space, says Simon.
Big one for me is there is an epoch coming at the space industry at the moment where reusability is the future. It won't be economically viable to throw away single-use rockets, and that is evident in a lot of our minds at the moment. And the trick, from my point of view, or the thing that I'm mindful of, is that date, wherever it is running towards us. So we need to start thinking about the sustainability element to this, being able to reuse our own vehicles, and what that looks like, and trying to race to make sure that we can meet that.
You said earlier that the Vegemite was basically going to disappear. How can you reuse anything from that experience?
It'll have to be a slightly different rocket. It'll have to fly itself back to the pad and return the Vegemite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about, we've got another question about space junk as well as space trash. So is that, do we need to be harvesting that as well? Is there any reusability of any of that stuff?
That's a really good question. It's a cool one too, because there's an Australian company doing this, and it's Neumann Space in South Australia, and the founder, Paddy Neumann, he is a specialist in electric propulsion for satellites, and what his technology can do is actually chew solid propellant, which is metal-based solid propellants, and then convert that into thrust. So not only can we reuse it in the context of bringing it back down and doing something with it, we can turn dead satellites into fuel and like Pac-Man our way through space in the future. Maybe snake's a better analogy.
I don't know. I love that. I love that. We were speaking earlier and I said, what happens when you're sending so much stuff up there? Like, how many more satellites are we going to be? Obviously, you see a business model in it, right? So talk to me about the numbers of satellites that are going to have to head up, and then whether there are potential issues with that.
So a satellite has an average age of between 5 and 7 years. So even the satellites that are up there now, they need to be renewed and recycled up there and so forth. So we have some data saying that between now and 2030, just over 10,000 satellites need to go up to orbit, which leads a huge potential for us, because there's only a handful of companies that can actually deliver that to orbit. So again, back to my comment before, once we have proven it ourselves in one of these tests, we'll be booked out and we won't have rockets left. So organisations will need to engage with us and contract with us for a number of orbit or launches very early on, like probably later this year, to be honest.
Right.
It is a bit of a scary thing, to the point of like, how much can we put up there before we, imbalance the control system and
before there's a constant cloud, before our solar panels don't work anymore.
Yeah. There is a point where if we have satellites crash into each other, that creates debris that hits other satellites, that creates a bigger debris cloud that hits other satellites, until space is just unusable for everyone.
So in the event of a blackout, of this kind of space blackout, what would we notice?
In your day-to-day life, most of the things that we interact with constantly is GPS and the timing signals. So fortunately, that's up at 20,000 kilometres. So that will keep working for a bit, but we won't be able to replace those satellites. The Earth observation stuff, that's up fairly high, so that'll be okay as well for a little bit. We just won't be able to replenish the constellations. It's all the LEO stuff, so it's the Starlinks, you'll see the internet connectivity and that sort of thing. That'll be the first thing that would go. But we're very aware of this as a problem, and so we're seeing a lot of action and involvement with people who are putting stuff up in space to make sure that we don't even get to that point.
Yeah.
We have, NASA has a 20-year rule where if you put a satellite up, it has to naturally deorbit in that 20-year period once your mission's over. That's now been reduced down to a 5-year rule that's being implemented by the FCC. So a lot of restrictions and rules are now being put in place to make sure that everyone's cleaning up after themselves. You put a satellite up there, you got to do your homework and make sure that thing's going to come down.
Now, you mentioned NASA. It just makes me think about how Growing up, space was a playground for government agencies only. I'm curious to hear about Gilmour Space Technologies' origin story, but also to wind back a little bit further from that and how we went from a government agency playground to commercial space tourism as an option.
Yeah, certainly. There's actually a fantastic book called When the Heavens Went on Sale that basically describes and depicts a number of the early starter rocket companies and what primarily came out of a NASA program. A lot of these companies started from there and it went from that point of view. Now, it came to the point where private tech and people investing their own money could speed up the whole process of developing a rocket and propulsions and so forth. So from there, it really gained momentum across New Zealand, for example, with Sir Peter Beck and Rocket Lab. He was one of the pioneers. He started off by effectively putting a rocket engine on a bike and racing a really fast car and winning. So that's how he very much started. And from there, that gained private equity or VC investments, government grants and so forth, and that's really how Rocket Lab started. Now they're launching 14, 16 rockets a year. They've got headquarters in the US now. They're still a New Zealand presence as well, but a lot of it started just from organisations seeing how long some of the government agencies were taking to build rockets. I guess the inefficiencies, the process that they had to overcome. They thought if they could do it in their backyard or in their garage, where a lot of these companies started from, they could get to the end game a lot quicker. And then that gave them momentum. They did engine tests, they did rocket tests. That gained VC funding, then it gained government support or contracts from government to go and develop further technologies and rockets and satellites and so forth. So that's pretty much how it evolved.
And the Gilmour story? How did Gilmour come to arrive in this landscape?
Yeah, so Gilmour very much started, Adam Gilmour and James Gilmour started the company back in 2013. Adam was a banker. They both had a real big passion for space. Adam really saw that there was a big hole in the market. There was a big problem. There was a lot of companies building satellites. There were a lot of VCs backing satellite companies, but there was no one to take them to orbit. So no matter how many satellites were being built, there was just this massive gap in who was going to actually be able to take them anywhere. So he saw that, he did some research and proved a couple of early engine tests. He then got an invite and went over to NASA. NASA at the time were trying to get people to move to the US and launch from the US. He was talking to some of the executives at NASA and basically said, so how many people here, and there were companies from all around the world, how many people here have launched a rocket? And the NASA people said, oh, not many, actually no one. There's been a lot of hot fire tests, a lot of engine tests. And he said, but no one here has actually launched a rocket. He said, okay, I'm going to do it. And he went back to Australia and said to the team that in 9 months, I want to build and launch a rocket. And they did it. And the rest is history. So it's evolved since there.
That's mind-blowing to think. Like, it's not that nobody in the room on that day hadn't achieved it because they just hadn't thought to go back to their teams and tell them to do it. So
yeah, exactly.
How was it that he was able to achieve something that's so difficult to achieve?
It just bootstrapped a lot of it. There was a handful of people, 10 people originally. They grew the company to about 40, 50 people. They all had one goal, and that was to launch a rocket. He originally got a lot of the early employees from hobby groups. He literally posted on space hobby groups. Does anyone in Australia know about rockets, propulsion engines, so forth?
Wow.
He got a lot of interest from there, which was fantastic. People literally quit their jobs to come and join him. He was going to back the company with his money for a while until they proved a number of the tests and built a rocket and launched it. And then from there, he was going to try and get VC money. And people believed in that story and the passion behind it. They literally quit their jobs and joined him and built Gilmour Space. And
you've been talking about VC money and that sort of propelling the industry a bit. But what sort of an animal is a venture capitalist? Like, what is their appetite and what are they a little bit skittish about?
It's like any investor. They want a return for their money. They are positive until something bad happens. Fortunately, though, the way that we manage the VCs that we have in superannuation funds is we tell them and keep them along the ride on the core milestones and the technology that we want to tick off. If we keep telling them about the milestones and then presenting back on them and making progress towards those milestones, they're generally pretty happy. I think if you stall or spend exponential larger amounts of money than what you say you're going to, then they probably wouldn't be so happy. But as long as you're making progress and heading forwards, we've been able to manage them at the moment, which has been good.
So you have the story of Gilmour Space over the last just over 10 years or so now, growing and developing and meeting milestones, as you say.
Yep.
But in the meantime, the world spins, and even lately we have examples of the rules changing a bit, the geopolitics changing a bit. So just thinking a little bit about politics and thinking about sovereignty, how does that story change things or not change things for Gilmour?
Yeah, it changes it in a positive way, I think. So there's obviously been a lot happening in the US that we all know. One of the big, I guess, factors for us in Australia and the other allied nations like Europe is very much around the defence spending. So at the moment, our defence spending is around about 2.04% of GDP. Now, Donald Trump has basically come out and said that all the allied countries need to spend at least 3%. So that is billions of dollars. And a lot of that, because of the backlog with a lot of the American companies, that means the government will have to spend it within Australia and in sovereign companies like us, which is fantastic. So a European white paper on defence was actually released last week after the Trump administration have been changing the game, so to speak, and all that paper was talking about sovereign capability. And it's very much what Australia has to focus on too, is have that sovereign capability. We have to be able to have our own communication channels. We have to be able to have our own access to space to put the satellites up there for the communication. We have to have the hypersonic capabilities. So there is a huge gap in the Australian market at the moment, but it's perfect for us to actually capture some of that gap.
And what's the tech risk on this with the idea of sovereignty and supply chains and, if we weren't to be able to do it all ourselves?
One of the big challenges is a lot of the technology that we need is typically sourced from the US. So that's the disadvantage. Sometimes some of these supply chains, it's hard to get parts. I remember in the early days, we're a very vertically integrated company, which means that we build an absurd amount of, design and build an absurd amount of the rocket ourselves for the first rocket. But we were kind of pushed there through necessity because we struggled to actually get access to some of these parts. The American parts are completely off board. Can't get any of them. Could
you describe an annoyingly simple part that you really wanted to get that you just couldn't get?
The flight termination box. There's a box, and it's like, for the good of mankind, you should make it really easy for people to get flight termination boxes, because if that box doesn't work, or you try and build it yourself and you stuff it up, the rocket's veering off course and goes somewhere it shouldn't. So for the good of humanity, you should try and make that technology as available to as many people as possible. But we've had to try and work with European partners and some of the European suppliers. We're not a big enough fish for them. They're used to working with ESA and other large organisations. We've built one rocket, second one's on the floor. The volume's not there for them, so they're not going to waste their time with us. So here we are. We got to build our own flight computers. Our batteries are handmade. Our rocket engines are all manufactured in our facilities. And not because we want to, we have to do that through necessity. The advantage of that is that we're able to tweak things. If we need to update the design of a rocket engine, we can do that very easily. And then in a world where the geopolitical walls start going up, that's going to be a good thing for us in the long run.
We talked a bit about raising money to make this happen and some of the commercial opportunities that will flow. Assuming I take your card, and I understand the FOMO of maybe not being able to get a satellite up unless I talk to you guys immediately.
Yeah.
How much is it going to cost for me to book one in?
It's a lot cheaper than SpaceX. So SpaceX, they're charging around $50-60 million US for a launch. That's a lot bigger, obviously.
And you know that because you're using them.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're not paying that.
Right.
But that's a dedicated launch, and they take up thousands of satellites. So that's the difference between the SpaceX rocket and ours. Their payloads and their mass is so large, they take up literally constellations at a time, which is thousands of satellites. They only go to one orbit, and the satellites have to find their own way to their end destination. We're going to be more like a commercial jet. So wherever you want to go, we can take you. And off the back of that, our weight is, as I mentioned, it's going to be around 300-400 kilos. So that's probably around 3 or 4 satellites. We're looking at probably charging, I think the going rate in the market now is around 10-12 million US for a launch vehicle of that size.
Excellent.
So,
Say that a little bit.
Walking around money, right?
yeah, so cheap, very cheap.
Excellent. A question here, what are the legal regulations involved around launching, this is rocks, but I think rockets and like space in general? That's been a big hurdle to try to clear, right?
Yeah,
the regulatory side of things.
I mean, there's been a lot of, I guess, roller coaster rides for Gilmour, technology-based, raising money-based, trying to get money out of the government to help promote R&D on the rocket and the space industry. But I think all of that is probably not as big as the hurdle of overcoming the regulatory barriers. I think that's the one thing that the company underestimated over everything else. We have literally been waiting on the pad, as Kody mentioned, since this time last year, and we're still waiting for the final regulatory tick of approval to go. So that's been really hard to fathom for the company. It's taken its toll financially. I think it's probably cost us another $20 million off the back of that, of just having to keep things going over the last 12 months or so without anything coming back for it. There's been a lot of mental anguish from our staff because we've had 40 or 50 really senior engineers daily just having to answer questions to the regulators. They don't want to do that. They want to design rockets. They want to test rockets. They want to do all the real sexy stuff, not write papers. So that's been a real mental strain on a number of people in the organisation. We've lost staff because of it. So yes, it's been painful financially, but there's a whole lot of other parts that have played a big part in it. We're hoping this process will get better going forward. It has to, otherwise there won't be a space industry in Australia. We've agreed to sit down with the regulators, and they've agreed to sit down with us and work on a better process going forward. We really need to get to a point where, like a SpaceX, hate to use them again, but they're launching every 3 days. We need our regulatory environment to be able to manage an industry with that kind of cadence.
I'll just, if you haven't had a chance to ask a question on Slido yet, don't forget that you have the power to do that, but you need to get the question in before we wrap up the conversation today. So you may as well do that. Either, if you would like to, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and you can use the hashtag QBLHOF for Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame, of course. And that's also your hashtag if you're wanting to have a commentary about this on social media today, of course. You would get this question, depending on the audience a bit, but Morgan just wondering, how does my 11-year-old son prepare to work at Gilmour Space one day when the regulatory environment's different and he won't have to spend the entire time answering to government? What does he need to do?
Well, I mean, I'll answer the first little bit, then you can go into the actual route to get into the space industry. But I think I've been in software companies prior to this, and banking and big accounting firms and everything. I've never seen an organisation with so many passionate people about what they do. It's actually not a job. Like, everyone at Gilmour, most people at Gilmour go there because they love space. You have to have a burning desire to be in that industry because
Which fuel is that? No.
That's not the accounting team. But people that work there, they just love space. They have a passion for it. You know, it's not a 9 to 5 job. There is long hours to prove technology. But at the same token, as I tell people within the organisation, especially some of the younger people, they're literally making Australian history. And there's not many jobs that you can go to on a daily basis and stay, you're actually making history. You're writing the history books. So it's a fantastic opportunity for young people, especially people that are living in Queensland, all around Australia, to come and relocate and join us. Because there's just so many interesting things there. There's so many great people to work with experience like Kody and the team. We've got senior engineers from some of the big other rocket companies around the world that have come and joined us. So it's a very cosmopolitan and international feel to the organisation as well. But you really just have to be passionate about space. The actual path to get there, I mean, you've lived it, you've done it, so you're probably better to comment on it than I am.
Sometimes it's different when you're in it for the people coming up though, right? Like I imagine the goalposts will change a little bit, but what's a good place to start?
I completely want to echo what Ash said about when you're a grad out of uni, we're not actually looking that much at your report card or how well you did in the grading system. We are looking for the passion, how well you're going to work with a team. I do want to be clear and say it's really not for the faint-hearted. It is. I've aged significantly. This is all. been a big couple of years. The work is hard. We do big hours at the launch site. They're spending a lot of time in the lab. We have to be extremely due diligent with what we're working on. These are rockets. They have a real complexity behind them. But at the end of the day, I'd say that the people in the organisation who are there for the passion element, and that's what shines through. You'll learn more in a year at Gilmour than you will in 10 years in most other companies.
And is it just, I mean, within the ecosystem of Gilmour, like what sort of degrees should you be doing to have the best opportunities there?
You'd be surprised actually. We've got like. So the first thing I'll say is it's not all engineers. Everyone always thinks it's just the rocket scientists that make the rocket fly, but that's really not the case. There's quite a lot of fascinating stuff happening in the legal space. Supply chain, we have some very unique challenges, as I was mentioning before, in the supply chain space. I'm sure the finance aspects are unique in their own right.
Correct. It
is not just engineers that make a rocket fly, by no means. For those who are mathematically and scientifically inclined, though, there's a big element of study hard and learn as much as you can. But at the end of the day, those who are good at working in the practical world, I would say, are the ones who really shine through. So some people can ace a math test, but I want to see if you can put a PCB together, write some code, and make something work.
Do you have internship opportunities? Asks Isabel.
We do. There's two different ways to intern. If you want to go with the paid path, which is my recommendation for everyone who's you lived as much through ramen noodle university days as I did. The DIP internships is one of the great ways to get into Gilmour. So that's DIIP. Or alternatively, if you go to our careers page, you can also apply for the unpaid internship opportunities. They're pretty selective processes though, so both ways it's a bit tricky to get into. Our hope is that we have success in the next 3 launches and we'll be able to massively scale up the company and expand what we're doing and increase our headcount. So I can see a future that where we start really pumping these out and get to the point of cash flow positive. We'll be a 1,000 plus company in a number of years' time.
Robert asks, has SpaceX ruined it for everyone? You mentioned SpaceX a couple of times. Has it ruined it for everyone? Has it led the way in a bit? Or what? Like, is it good? Is it not good?
I think from a commercial point of view, it certainly hasn't ruined it. I think it's certainly given the industry a lot more publicity, which has been good.
Open the doors in a way to break out of the old way of doing aerospace engineering. They've created a revolution.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the common question that we often get is, well, we didn't know that anyone in Australia builds rockets, let alone on the Gold Coast. So, and then they say, oh, you're going to be the SpaceX of Australia. And effectively, yeah, we want to be. But we need to be known. We want all of Australia to know who Gilmour is, come along for the ride for the first launch. supported it. It's effectively our Olympics, and the Olympic team obviously gets a lot of support, so we would love a lot of support from Australia for the first launch and beyond. But SpaceX certainly hasn't ruined it. I think they've opened up the eyes to the industry and what's possible, and they've certainly created a lot of opportunities, as I mentioned before, about the differences between us and SpaceX to other players in the industry.
One of the things I'll just tack on to the end of that is Australia has a fairly unique culture in the context of the rest of the world. We're not super cool with failure compared to US VC software companies and whatnot. So it's going to be a hard slog. Like we don't know how the public is going to react to watching a rocket fall out of the sky and pop. But we really do want to bring the Australian public along for the ride. You know, that is something that I think is culturally Australian. It's like we're all in this together, and this is going to be really hard for us to do. And these things extend beyond the influence of just what our company can do. We need the support of the public and the regulators and investors to actually make this happen and to make this enduring and long term. So the reason Ash and I love doing this and talking to people about this is we really are trying to get people on board. That said, we know Australians aren't super cool with failure yet. So to answer Jesse's question, we won't have a live stream for the first one. Sorry, we're just not sure how the public will handle that.
Will you at least video it and then send it around later?
We'll send you the edited after story, and if it goes really badly, it'll probably be very poorly photoshopped. So you'll catch us out there. But
I just assumed it would be live streamed. I'm disappointed now. I'm invested. Not literally.
Maybe Rocket 2.
Yeah,
maybe. I've tried to twist our head of communications arm a couple of times, and she said, not for the first one, but
It's a
we'll
pretty
see.
solid arm, isn't it?
It's a solid arm.
But even SpaceX still goes pop, though. They've had 2 pops this year, and they were big pops.
Yeah.
And they've got billions of dollars behind them, and we've got a few million. So
Yeah, and you said potentially a whole constellation of satellites in there as well.
Exactly.
As they
So
do that.
even the big players can go pop.
Yeah.
And we will live stream it eventually. But you guys have got to be cool about it, all right?
If we could think about the business, this idea of Gilmour as a business, and what lessons you've learned that might be transferable, applicable to people who are not necessarily in the rocket science game.
Yeah.
What have you learned about it? Well, how do you kind of reflect on? We talked about failure, for example.
Yeah.
What are some of the big lessons that you've learned?
The biggest lesson that I think for any business, you've got to be solving a problem. There has to be a problem there to start with. And if you can identify that problem, then you're halfway there. And it's just about the persistence to get there. It is a roller coaster. There's lots of ups and downs and path and steps forwards and then 3 steps back. So you've got to have the tenacity, the discipline, and the determination to see it through. You've got to be and have the right people around you as well. You've got to have obviously smart people around you, but you've also got to have the people there that can pick you up on a bad day, because no day is ever going to go to plan. There's always something, even now I go to work on a daily basis with a to-do list of what I want to get done. I probably don't get to it until Thursday because something happens that you've got to be very flexible, you've got to be very agile about. So I think there's a number of key learnings is determination, agile, relationships, and you've got to be problem solvers. And probably the biggest one too is it doesn't have to be perfect. There's a lot of organisations out there that fail because they want the perfect rocket, they want the perfect software, they want the perfect car, whatever it is, and they don't go to market because it's not perfect. If you're 80, 90% there, try it. Go out there and try it. Fail, test again. What I mentioned before about VC firms, they're just wanting to see progress. So as long as you're 80% there, 90% there, and you can go out there and demonstrate the tech, then you're halfway there.
I want to just emphasise that last point of Ash's there, is it's not very visible on how many organisations or projects, programs fail before anything tangible actually happens. There's this whole bottom of the iceberg that isn't fully appreciated. The reason that aerospace is so hard is because it was fundamentally government funded, and the government served public opinion, and so failures weren't typically accepted. So all of this emphasis and all of this overhead went into the engineering efforts that were done, and it wasn't the failures of the rockets that killed some of these big aerospace programs. It was the fact that there was so much burden and administration that was thrown onto it. It was smothered out, and it died in a whimper as opposed to dying in a bang. Yeah. And we don't really pay much attention to that. So my, I guess, reflection for those who are thinking about their own business ventures and whatnot is really assess about how much overhead do I need to throw on to what I'm doing in order to get the outcome that I need. Because quite often human beings are conservative, and then we slap so much work on top that we can't get to the outcome that we're trying to see. And when I think about 12 months on the pad and not being able to launch and it costing us $20 million, that's 2 launch attempts right there. We had 5 chances. We've only got 3 to do it now. What's that cost?
Yeah. And so that would apply to any sort of startup environment or any business environment?
I believe so. I believe for those wanting to take risks and whatnot, if you're sitting there for 3 years second guessing yourself about whether you should do something or not, you probably could have spent that time better having a crack and getting to the answer sooner.
Yeah. Any other? Feel free to, by the way, to write a business question as well, but we're running out of time, so I'll just try to tackle a couple of these as well who've come in, that have come in. Let's see, Will is talking about the future of propulsion, and you were talking about different types of fuels. Is this
different types of propulsion? Oh, yeah. Man, this is... You
guys
are going to get me wrong.
You've got an extra half an hour.
This is going to be really... We're going to do an experiment here, and we're going to see how many technical terms there is in Australian Sign Language that she can actually interpret. This is going to be... So thermonuclear propulsion techniques are becoming a constant trend in... No, I actually, realistically, there's kind of 2 elements. You've got endo-atmospheric and exo-atmospheric. She's doing it! You can't... There's no real EV equivalent for rockets. We still have to burn fuel and use Newton's third law to get us up into space. Because when you're in space, you've got to be ejecting mass to be able to move in the other direction. So this one, but I'll probably leave it at those 2 for now.
That's just a taster. Yeah, we can find out more in our own degrees. What about the idea of AI? We've got a couple of questions about basically existing knowledge. So somebody asking why the need to even design a rocket on your own, couldn't you just download one? And then the other one saying, talking about using AI as well, and how you use that in your design and development process and business process.
Do you mind if I go for this one?
Go for it.
So we're becoming very familiar now with generative AI and the language models, the GPTs and the whatever Elon called his one. There's also this other thing in Silicon Valley that's sort of popping up at the moment, which is like vibe coding. It's where you give the essence of what you want the software to do without really picking it apart and just letting it build your product for you. And the advantage here is that you can release a product with like 1% of the effort or the resource that you required compared to just 5 years ago. It's really good for getting a concept out there. It's really not great when you have to try and upgrade or maintain that, because it's like having someone else do your homework and then trying to justify it to the teacher when you come in the next day. That can kind of work for a little bit in the software world. If you did that with hardware and rocketry and computer-aided design for mechanical engineering, you'd start building a patch-quilty Frankenstein mess that would very likely just explode when you try and test everything all together. So maybe the tools in terms of doing hardware engineering will improve in the future, but at this point, you need to have a very intricate understanding of the underlying physics and mathematics to be able to anticipate what something is actually going to do. And the complexity of these systems is enormous, and you really have to understand it to be able to make it work.
Jeffrey's asking about the emissions footprint of the rocket. We talked a little bit about environmental considerations, but what's the carbon footprint of this thing?
The neat thing is, so we have a hybrid rocket engine, solid fuel, liquid oxidizer, goes pop instead of bang. It puts out water vapor and, oh my goodness, I can't. It's very, very sustainable in terms of the byproduct, and that's just the artifact of the hybrid rocket engines. Still, that's for stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 3, the top one that's inside the payload fairing, that one is Kerolox. So that one is dinosaur. And in the future, we'll be seeing more methane. We'll be seeing, methane's not great for the atmosphere though. We'll be seeing more hydrogen. That's a pretty sustainable fuel. So you'll be seeing that, the byproduct's water. This is starting to become something that the investors are interested in. If we're putting thousands and thousands of tons of payload in space, you've got to keep in mind that the fuel is roughly 60 to 70% of the vehicle's mass, and on the order of 1 to 3% is the payload. So for every ton that goes up, you've got roughly 10 to 30 times the amount of fuel that needs to be burnt for that. So the world's becoming more conscious of these eco-friendly fuels.
Tell me a good story, though, about something satellites can do for the environment.
Oh,
One of the 10,000 that spring to mind.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the bushfire?
Yeah, the bushfire I think is going to be a good one. So this is something that we're working on at the moment. Is our satellites are being designed to be able to firstly calculate the amount of fuel load in Australia. So you can look at the chlorophyll levels in the grass and in the trees and that, and get an indication about how dry or what the fire risk is of Australia. So the satellites go over, and you can get an update on the most likely areas to catch fire. Then the next part that the satellite can do is the early detection of fire. So we're getting resolution with infrared images now, which picks up heat, that we can send the firefighters out to where the fire will be long before it becomes unmanageable. So the size of, let's say, a car or a house as opposed to the size of a suburb. And there's real evidence showing that we're going to be able to make a tangible impact to firefighting in the future. And then there's the communications piece. So we're able to provide live updates in the field to where the bushfires are heading, where the flame fronts are, and then to be able to provide the communications aspect where firefighters are able to coordinate and talk to each other in areas that don't previously have phone coverage or 4G or whatnot. And that's all capability that can be enabled by satellites, and one that I'm particularly excited about, living in a fire hazard area.
Despite lots of talk about made in Australia, Australia isn't seen as a manufacturing country. This is a question in from Danny. How have you overcome that to be able to manufacture breaking edge tech? And what were the biggest hurdles from that perspective?
As Kody mentioned before, we're probably about 60%, if not a little bit higher, vertically integrated now. So to be honest, we didn't have much choice but to bring a lot of it in-house. Going on to the delay again, a lot of our suppliers were banking on quite a large cadence for us over this year, next year and going forward. A number of those entities have gone into administration or have reached out to us for help or that kind of thing. So the delays have not only impacted us, but also the industry as a whole across Australia. So off the back of that, we've had no choice but to bring a lot of that in-house, which has been good. So now that we can control our own destiny as far as the whole manufacturing process goes, we've recently moved into a new 10,000 square metre facility at Yatala, which has been fantastic. We had 3 sort of separate factories before that. Now we're all under one roof, which is great. So the collaboration between the R&D teams, the engineers and the the people on the floor building the actual parts is just so much healthier now. We can get to the end point a lot quicker. We can test a lot quicker. We can then redesign, retest the whole thing a lot better by doing it internally. So it's been very helpful, but there's still a long way to go. So every R&D project that we have on the books is very much dependent on funding. We have only an excellent amount of funding. We'd love to be able to do a lot more R&D funding, but off the back of that, we'd need help, whether it be from VC, superannuation, government contracts to explore different parts of the space industry or aerospace technology. But it all has a dollar value, unfortunately. Kody would love to go and design everything tomorrow, but he's not allowed to. So,
Kody, can I just get you to explain? I've got a question about how do you distribute multiple satellites from one rocket and get them on their own orbits?
Yeah, great question.
How do you propel those little satellites? How could you fly them around, or do you just hope for the best, spill them out in the right spot?
Funny enough, that is a lot of the time what happens. The rocket just like vomits them out into space, and most of them just go wherever they're going to go. You can do a few clever little things. Most satellites nowadays don't have onboard propulsion. So once they're up there, they're more or less staying where they're going. And there's a tiny bit of air up there, so over time they start degrading until they fall down and burn up in the atmosphere. There's a few tricks you can do. You can launch, so you've got orbital planes. So if you think about it, you're slicing an orange and you're putting satellites. If you're building a constellation, you've got to go in all of those different slices. But you also have to spread yourself out over a single orbit as well. So to get full constant coverage, you need to spread everything out. If you're going into a single orbit and you don't have propulsion, what you can do is a belly flop maneuver. So you go solar panels into your direction of travel, and that guy will start slowing down. Meanwhile, you sort of do a pin drop dive with one of the other satellites, and that one's going to start shooting ahead. And then once you've separated out inside that same orbital plane, then you're getting better coverage and revisit times from those two satellites. It takes, if you want to go into another slice, it takes a heck of a lot of delta V. It costs a lot of fuel, and no belly flop maneuver can help you get into another orbit. That's why we need small launches to be able to launch into different orbital planes.
Well, the time has come for us to manoeuvre ourselves off this stage. I'm not sure if we'll try the belly flop or the pin drop or something else. I might leave you guys to go first. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing this time with us today and for letting us know just a tiny bit more about space, about what Gilmour Space Technologies is trying to do, and to let us peek into the future a little bit. Could we have a round of applause? I think they've earned it. Thank you. It's so cool to be here and hearing from these guys in the World Science Festival, Brisbane. There'll be heaps of other science stuff going on around our city. It's going to be wonderful, but no matter what else you choose to check out in the program, it's not rocket science. You've got that tonight. That's done. So thank you so much to Ashley Hasforth and Kody Cook, and thank you so much to our Auslan interpreters, Candice and Julie. I don't have the final word of the night tonight, though. The final word goes to Professor Cameron Newton from QUT. Could you please welcome him to the stage now?
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you, Kody and Ashley, and thank you, Kate, for a really engaging and inspiring conversation. Please give them a round of applause again. I always like to try and sum up these events with some, witty or clever kinds of things, but I have definitely been overshadowed by both of you too, so I'm not even going to really try. But I will say that, Game Changers continues to bring inspirational people, and it certainly hasn't let us down tonight. A few takeaways from me. Thank you, first of all, for sharing the ups and downs of being the first in Australia for doing what you are doing. That is truly just a remarkable thing, and I genuinely want to watch it online. And I will be going home, and my 11-year-old will be watching this tonight before he goes to bed because he wants to be an aerospace engineer. A few other things I took away. Okay to fail. Fail first. We teach that. We teach that about being entrepreneurial, and get in there, fail first, and do it. The other thing I found really great was the way you define success. And in actual fact, the way you define success first is to fail. If you can get off for 10 seconds, then that would be great. But of course, you've got a staged definition of success, and then we go on and talk about satellites going up monthly. I think we heard about colonising the universe. There's got to be money in that. Space travel, and a special shout out to Ash, who has the special skill of being able to obtain money for potentially 10 seconds of flight. But you've still got the get in the queue card, and I would use that a lot, as you obviously are. I'd like to do a shout out for Kody as well, who I'm a really great fan of the dish. And, you know, if you're Australian, you've seen the dish. The basketball analogy really worked for me. So keep on doing that. You talked about bringing Australia along for the ride. I've never seen a better image of Australia than sitting on this stage right now. I think you guys should be the spokespeople for bringing Australia along for the ride. You're perfect for the job. You are Aussies through and through. You're bloody launching Vegemite, for God's sake. Thank you so much. A really, really entertaining night. If you'd like to revisit the conversation or share it with friends and colleagues, you'll be able to find a recording on the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame website within the next week. On behalf of the founding partners, QUT and the State Library of Queensland, I'd like to again thank our partners and sponsors who make the work of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame possible. Your ongoing support and commitment enable Queenslanders to gain new insights, as we very much have done tonight, from game-changing business leaders such as the Gold Coast-based Gilmour Space Technologies. One more round of applause for very special guest and Kate. It's time to head to our next venture, so please feel free to exit via the rear doors, or you can use the front doors. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thanks so much, everyone.